to abandon ship.
Oh no!
Here we go!
Can I persuade you to join us for a drink? It's a tradition.
Here, here.
Jar Jar, homie, my main man, quickly. Before the Separatists attack, get into the escape pod.
Fett! This is escape, then we're the pod.
Welcome back to Star Wars Escape Pod and another casual episode with us here. We've got Bryce and Blake and myself in the Escape Pod this week. We may or may not have two more or one more joining us, but we will see about that. On the roster tonight, we have discussions about Boba Fett and his influence on the Mandalorian show. We're going to be going down some bullet points there and just talking about what rubbed off on the story direction, some influences from the EU, all that stuff. And Disney Parks is bringing in some new stuff to Galaxy's Edge, thank goodness. And Marvel's got some interesting news about the originally canceled adaptation of The Rise of Skywalker coming back to the land of the living. So we will get into those in a bit.
Another happy landing.
All right. Well, hello there, Blake.
You didn't play the Boba Fett song.
Oh, here it is.
Nice, there it is. I thought you'd be ready with that.
I thought I would be, and then I couldn't find it. I thought, oh, well, maybe I got rid of it. It's been so long.
Boba Fett.
Apparently, I still got it. Overlapped with.
We can play the Mandalorian too. It's just gonna be noise.
It's just clearly I'm not a
Can't handle
DJ.
it.
Clearly, I'm not a DJ by any means.
You have one volume control.
No beat matching on this mixer board.
No, don't mix it at all.
No. All right, we also have Bryce. Welcome back, Bryce. Oh, wait, hold on. I muted the track. There we go. Welcome back, Bryce.
Hey, what's up, guys?
So we're too distracted listening to our theme songs over here.
Yeah, that's right.
Man, I made a great Oompa Loompa joke, and that's why you guys weren't laughing at it.
Oh man.
Nice.
Well, you can always just repeat it.
I'll save it for next episode.
Okay, sounds good.
I have a whole lineup of Oompa Loompa jokes, so there's no shortage, no rush.
Was that the joke? Because they're short?
Yeah.
Okay. Man, this guy's pretty quick.
This guy's pretty good.
So
See, you're also an Oompa Loompa. Okay, let's move on.
Is there an equivalent to Oompa Loompas in Star Wars?
Ewoks, I guess.
They're probably the same
I feel
actors.
like they're like Ugnaughts.
Ewoks.
Ugnaughts, yeah. Because they're like the workers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And they're short.
Which
And
makes
they're orange.
Lando Willy Wonka.
I don't think Ugnaughts are orange. Sorry, what was that?
That makes Lando the Wonka of Star Wars.
That's true, actually. Man, that would be a great cosplay.
That is a nice hat there, Willy Wonka. Just like takes over.
I can see it. I can
Chewbacca
totally
fell
see it.
into the chocolate river.
Oh man, so is that why you had to give up the Millennium Falcon, because it was like being on the boat in the Chocolate River? Everyone was just tripping out all the time.
And the Empire is just like Cadbury wants to buy him out.
The
This is getting so deep.
I know the actual the twist is that at the end of the chocolate factory they turn Han Solo into a giant golden chocolate bar.
Nice.
I do like that a lot, actually.
Oh, that'd be awesome. All right, so first up tonight was a subject that has fascinated you for a little while, being that Boba's original story has some key influences on the Mandalorian.
Yeah, it's true. Because I know I'm trying to reach into the depths of my mind now, because it has been a hot minute since I've done a lot of research into this. But I know a lot of the old EU story of Boba Fett, he was and I believe it's still canon around the era he's around. He's the most badass bounty hunter in the galaxy, right? Isn't he the number one bounty hunter during the Empire?
That's the general idea, I think. Yeah.
Okay, because in the EU, I remember there was always Boba was like the top contender. Everyone considered him the best bounty hunter you could hire. But he operated outside of the guild, and then Bosk and his family ran the guild, and it's kind of like everyone, all the other bounty hunters in the galaxy were all part of the guild and had like a code and stuff. But then Boba could kind of do jobs that normally weren't acceptable.
And that was just something that, so he was actually sort of a villain within villains.
Well, he was like I think I saw a good description of it. Isn't like with like D&D, he'd be like lawful neutral. So it's like he doesn't really care one way or the other. He's just got hired to do a thing. And he's going to do it.
Yeah. What's interesting about the character, obviously, from when you take the idea of Boba Fett as to who he was, and mind you, keep in mind as well that the EU is like super diverse with like lots of.
There's
stories.
a lot of years of stuff. Yeah,
there's a lot of years of stuff, and some of them are not exactly like paralleling all the others, and some of them might give certain depictions of the character, and others might contradict those depictions.
And
right?
there was a huge change. So we talked a little bit about this before the recording, but there was stories of Boba before the prequels, and in that he was always just a badass bounty hunter, and that's where a lot of people, he was really held up to the idea that everyone had of him. He was just the cowboy man with no name. He's always gonna get it done. He's badass. He really isn't affectionate in any sort of way. He's just a stone cold killer for hire, essentially.
Right.
Get it
like
done.
I think like before the prequels, I don't think anyone necessarily cared too much about the Mandalorians, right? People cared about Boba Fett,
and he was considered a Mandalorian. That's really all anybody really knew about them.
For sure. But then with like the clones and like and you get stuff with, of course, I know you guys just did the podcast on Bounty Hunter, right?
The game,
like,
yeah.
And just that with Jango Fett, and it becomes like he's like the last of these kind of true Mandalorians, and there's evil Mandalorians and good Mandalorians, and it's like, so I think it hit the interest in him kind of explodes, and they kind of have to do it like kind of like you were saying, almost another rewrite.
Yeah, plus the rewrite of the fact that now Boba is a clone, so he's no longer his own person.
Exactly.
Like, he didn't grow up and become who he is. He was raised by someone to basically be exactly like them, and genetically is identical. So it's like he became a copy of a guy instead of being the original character. I think a lot of people took issue to that, but I know you've also mentioned that then a lot of the EU books took a turn about him dealing with what became like essentially clone cancer.
Like, I think that makes him, honestly, I really liked, I can't really like think exactly about like what happens in that kind of scenario. I just know like he's like super broke, like
Right.
he's getting really old. He's super broke. He's like not the hunter he used to be, but he's still got that killer instinct, and he has to like kind of literally kind of bounty hunt for his life, which means I think you were saying he has to break rules, right? Like go outside the guild, do like just some crazy stuff, which I think him being a clone, personally, I like that, because it's kind of this thing where he maybe doesn't always think he's a clone, and then it just adds this like depth, I think, to a character.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't argue with that. I do think it definitely adds a lot of uniqueness that is very specific to him.
Yeah, like it's a very cool story to tell. It's for like the baddest bounty hunter in the galaxy having to like find out like who exactly he is. Like, who am I? Am I just the, like,
it's
am
good.
I just an exact copy of my dad, or like,
Am I my own person?
Mm-hmm.
No, that's true, actually. I kind of wish they would go into that a bit more. Maybe they did a bit in the Clone Wars animated series. Josh, you could speak to that, but I do wish they would explore that more if they decide to continue his storyline in the new canon.
Like, you mean elements of the original story, you mean?
Just him exploring the himself being a clone. So it was like trying to get out from his dad's.
Well,
shadow.
I think I think they did explore that in Clone Wars a little bit.
Yeah.
Just
I think so too. Just not a lot.
No, it wasn't very much. But I mean, the story arc in which he relies on an old friend or colleague, I guess you would call her, of Jango's, which is Aura Singh, for using her as. She's basically taken the role of a mentor to Boba, in this time of which he is fatherless, and we don't really know who this kid is hanging out with, or like what exactly he's been up to this whole time. And I think that's why I still hold a high appreciation for his storyline in the Scholastic books called I think they was just called Boba Fett, but they were Clone Wars novels for junior readers. And this is old EU stuff, but they really got into Boba's head of like this journal that Jango left behind in case he was killed, and as far as like leaving a legacy behind for whoever he passes on the torch to, which is interesting that we were talking about Bounty Hunter and this idea that his colleague Roz planted the idea that like, hey, like what do you what comes next for you if you live a life of danger? Like wouldn't you like to have a legacy, right? Like what are you leaving behind? And that's why he asks for a son, because he knows like, okay, in this life I'm not going to meet anyone and settle down, so like this is the realistic option. I'm just going to clone myself. I'm going to raise this clone of me as my own, as my son. So he has prepared this in the EU again, like he has prepared this sort of initiative of like, this is what follows my death.
I just want to pause you there one moment. It's very interesting, actually. Even just that specific window was Din Djarin and Grogu. Like even that dad dynamic of like, well, I'm bounty hunter. This is my life. Like not gonna settle down. Suddenly, opportunity to have a kid, and that just totally changes your course.
Yeah, I guess with Din Djarin, it was almost like more so like the reluctance of falling into that situation, whereas like Jango kind of
you slowly coaxed into it.
Yeah. But anyway, this story of Boba taking over Jango's mantle, takes place through these books. And I like to think that a lot of that content could still be a thing within the canon, if they so deemed it to be. In both stories, the canon 3D Clone Wars animated show, as well as the novels, there is a story arc in which he is obsessed with getting revenge on Windu. And in the show, as Aurra Sing is kind of being this guide at this present time, very similar to how she is also in the books, weirdly enough. But she's kind of a more of a villain person, like just using Boba to kind of advance her I don't know, she's just not a good influence, you know what I mean? Like, and at the end of the day, she is like trying to run away and doesn't care about Boba and all this and that.
She's just using him, yeah.
Yeah, and it was just like it was an eye-opening story, I think, for the character, because it was like, okay, the word of wisdom came from like Hondo at the end of the day in that story arc, and
only prophet.
And it was like, yeah, he said something about just tell the Jedi what they want to know. It's the honorable thing to do. It's what your father would have wanted.
Oh, okay.
And it's just like, man, like even like there is definitely some honor with that character. You know what I mean? But I feel like to get back to what you were asking originally about, with that story arc, what they accomplished was him dealing with this idea of there were these hostages and they're all clones, right? And he was like struggling with the idea of like, no, I'm different from them.
All right, and they kept calling him brother and stuff.
Yeah, and they were like, you don't have to do this. Like, you're one of us. Like, you can get us out of this kind of thing. Like, they were trying to like.
Right, this is on Camino.
This is when he went undercover as a clone.
Yeah.
And so like, yeah, it was that whole thing, right? Anyway, so so to get back to that, like, it's just, I think they did really approach that from a really great angle, because not only did he go undercover as these clones that share his face, his father's face, but he also had a moment of rage when they really tried to like, they didn't understand that he wasn't one of them. And, he kind of like, he's like, no, I'm not like them, not like those two. And he like points to them, and he doesn't really quite get out the words, like how.
So he can't really explain it.
He can't really explain it.
Really,
yeah.
Because he is technically genetically identical, other than the growth rate.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess the loyalty thing.
They have the same body.
That's it. But he was raised differently.
Yeah, in his head, he is completely different.
Exactly.
He is his father's son. Mm-hmm. He's not been raised by Kaminoans and droids, right?
Like a factory.
Yeah, in a factory. Yeah, exactly. So I think they actually, with that one story arc, they actually accomplished a lot. And it's not the only story arc he has. He did show up in another episode, which he teams up with Ventress, and and that was a really exciting train heist kind of style episode. Wasn't very deep for the character, but it was cool. And then there was like, I think maybe one or two other appearances, but One of the ones that we're both very still, I think, in regret about them not making was him versus Cad Bane,
which they technically did eventually make canon.
Yeah,
we were not too happy about how that was pulled off.
No, I really wish that they just finished Clone Wars, but they ended up pulling off the same kind of idea in the Book of Boba Fett when they face off technically again, and they actually finalized that thing there, but. Yeah, it was just like, I think they did a really good job of Clone Wars. I would like to see more of young Boba Fett, though.
Just to touch on that, I think a big part of why it was better in the Clone Wars arc is it followed a segment of time where Boba trained directly under Cad Bane, which now never happened. And I think is sorely missed because that would really explain how he then became what we now know as the best bounty hunter in the galaxy during the Dark Times.
Yeah. So,
Reign of the Empire. Yeah.
We're looking at like 5 bullet points here, which basically it's the surface level comparisons of what from Boba's legacy and existing original story has sort of transcended its way into the Mandalorian, I guess, right? The first one is the mysterious bounty hunter. So both Boba, Din Djarin, they're introduced as very enigmatic, skilled bounty hunters with a strong sense of professionalism, and this is very central to both those characters.
Especially the introductory Boba Fett that we got in Empire Strikes Back. And it's also interesting. I think we've talked about this before when watching Mandalorian, but it's really interesting how we had Boba Fett from the original trilogy, never removed his helmet, it became like a big thing. People were really upset when we saw his face as a kid and everything in the prequels. And then people are always saying, oh, he should be like this faceless character. He is his armor, right? And then it's funny how then we got Din Djarin, which a lot of his character is based around he can't show his face. So it's like the fan understanding and preference of Boba Fett like became this character at a fundamental level.
Yeah, definitely. Mandalorian armor and culture, big part of both those characters. Boba's iconic armor is a crucial part of his mystique, and the Mandalorian delves deeper into the history and culture of the Mandalorians, including their creed, codes, combat prowess. The exploration expands upon the limited information about the Mandalorians that existed before. And I think we've had this discussion before about how Boba's origins as a Mandalorian and kind of what that looked like before that was fully figured out. And I believe Darian also talked about this a little bit as well when we were talking about Bounty Hunter. But that's something that I really liked a lot about The Mandalorian, and something that long before that show came out, I think a lot of us Star Wars fans were like, yeah, Boba, Jango, like the Mandalorian culture that we knew was probably mostly constructed out of books from Karen Traviss and the Republic Commando series.
Yeah, for sure.
And very limited things in the EU from Boba Fett, I think Bryce talked about it off air, but the Bloodline novel from Legacy of the Force, just a few things here and there that we'd known from the old classic Star Wars Marvel comic book series from 1977, which I have a stack of actually, and I think you framed a few on your wall that I gave you. Yeah. So yeah, so yeah, stuff like that. But I don't know. Do you guys have anything else to say about that one?
No, I don't think so. Like so busy like reacquainting myself with all this like
deep lore,
this deep EU lore now. Yeah,
it's such a depth of stories and stuff. So try to put it all together. I mean, I think a lot of this does come down to John and Dave just wanting to reuse a lot of this like really good stuff that's come out over like a 50-year period, basically.
Yeah.
It's just, admittedly, with myself, I feel a little mixed about it because it does feel like it's stripped the character a little bit of what was once kind of what we understood of as Boba Fett, which is kind of why I wanted to talk about this a bit tonight.
Gotcha. Yeah. Right. So moral ambiguity. That's a really big one. So both characters operate in this gray area. While they may have personal codes, they often work for questionable clients, make difficult choices. They blur. It's a blurring of the lines between right and wrong, right? And a very obvious example here is when Boba is amongst the bounty hunter crew looking for heroes of the rebellion, like Han and Leia and the Falcon, right? And he is the guy who finds them and does the job, and Han Solo's captured, and that's all because of Boba Fett, right? But then when we watch him in the Mandalorian show and even in the Book of Boba Fett show, like he's kind of a protagonist in many ways.
They made him a lot more of a hero character for sure, which again, I'm not too sure I'm fond of, but because I feel like he would have fit better of almost like a Wolverine kind of reluctant hero if they wanted to do something about that, which was always my theory about when they were going to make the Boba Fett movie. If you remember that, I think it was Josh Trank.
Yeah.
Which I feel like would have been a bit of a better approach, fitting to what we knew about the character before we got the Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah, I feel like it kind of happens when you just learn too much. You like lose the mystery. You lose like kind of that, I don't know, that scariness like around a character like that. Like kind of like, you know, how Master Chief, you can never take his helmet off kind of thing. You know, the second you take his helmet off, he loses the magic. It's like the second you make Boba Fett have, you know, nice feelings, like positive you know, vibes, it's just like he kind of loses his edge, right?
Yeah.
No, that's actually a huge part of it.
I think Wolverine is a great example. Like they're such similar characters, aren't they?
Right.
I think, yeah, for sure, a very fundamental level.
Or they should be. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us were also expecting that because that feels like the best way to approach a character like that. And then they just didn't go that route. And I get that they probably wanted to he decided to change his ways after he was in the Sarlacc pit for how long, 6 months or something? I don't know how long it was. He had a lot of time to think about it.
Have any other characters like taken the place of Boba Fett? You know, like taken his attributes, you know?
I think that's just it. I think like Din Djarin kind of has in a way.
From a story perspective, yes, because this was always my theory that because they portrayed Din Djarin in The Mandalorian the way they did, they couldn't do a Boba Fett series as we had originally anticipated or wanted because it would be too similar of a story. So instead they had to do something different, which is why we got the Book of Boba Fett, which just to me felt quite out of character from what we already knew of Boba Fett.
Like he's a quiet rocketeer guy who's a bounty hunter, who's a Mandalorian, who doesn't say much. You know, like him and Boba Fett in their older years are all very similar. Din Djarin and Boba, right? And I think there's definitely like a parallel there with the characters and how they are, and that's what makes it so cool. When I mean, in Book of Boba gets a lot of flack, but there was a few shots in the finale episode of that show which, you know, you see them fighting side by side and it's just like so badass. Like
that's true.
Just the photography of some of those shots and the angles with them like in their costumes doing their thing, I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's just so cool.
And admittedly, when we first see Boba come back in Mandalorian, I think season 2, and he's Samurai Boba with his big flowy pants. He's very badass there.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, with the Tuscan, the
gaffy stick.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, with Din Djarin, he also faces a lot of gray area in his career. You know, the first job that we see him take on in his show is, I mean, the big one that is turning in a child for money.
Yeah,
you know, to the Empire, and he ends up backing out. He does it, but he ends up, you know, he's like, no, he changes his mind and rescues the kid, and then that's kind of what leads to the whole story of the first season and most of the second. But it's like, you know, I could totally see Boba doing something like that.
Yeah, I could too. It definitely feels in line with the character.
Yeah, I think two areas of where Boba's character has come from, I guess, when it comes to the whole Han Solo thing, and then also what Cad Bane says about Boba in their final moments of how he was a cold-blooded killer who took jobs for the Empire. And this is Cad Bane, mind you, saying this, who's, I think, all around perceived as a villain. Like, in almost every depiction through animation of Clone Wars, Bad Batch, live action, he is always a villain bounty hunter every single time. And so for him to say something like that, which kind of gives you the idea that Boba's even worse, like
that's what it alludes to, yeah.
And it's just like, it's almost confusing when you sort of make that comparison with how he's been perceived in the show and in the sort of surrounding material.
You can argue that after he got out of the Sarlacc pit. He just has such a change of heart when he was saved by the Tuskens. But
But even in Clone Wars, though, like Boba's always had a conscience.
yeah, he's always been softer.
Yeah, he's always had honor, right? He's always had respect. He's always had the traits of his father.
Yeah, which we see his dad have more so through the video game than the movie, unfortunately. But
Right. Yeah.
I can't speak to the comics.
Yeah, and it's not like, okay, like Jango has tried to kill multiple Jedi, right? Like, it's not like he is a
who
good
has?
guy. It's just like he has got at least a respectable guy. So
Well, he has a very honorable code,
yeah, he does. Yeah.
just like Din Djarin.
Yeah.
But you could argue that's part of Mandalorian culture.
Yeah, and I think Boba, Jango, I think he's a bit of a, I think he doesn't like it when somebody gets the upper hand on him, because the only reason he jumps down to try and finish Windu off after he sees the Reek trample over him is because Windu kind of got out of the situation that when Dooku sort of gives the nod of the head for Jango to take out Windu on the balcony there at first before the fight breaks out, and he gets away even after using his blasters and his flamethrower, like he gets out of there no problem. So he's kind of ticked off, right? Like, he's just like, geez, like, who's this guy I think he is, So when he sees an opportunity, he takes it and he just jets in there and he's like, I'm just going to kill this guy because, like, screw him.
I will say Jango's a lot better with his jetpack than Boba ever was, but
yeah, for sure.
When you look at it, like Django's raised by Mandalorians, right? Like he's like
That's true,
raised,
actually, yeah.
probably flying a jetpack from when he was a kid.
Oh yeah,
That's how he got to school.
That's what. When you're talking about like differences between Jango and Boba, like I was just thinking, like kind of just now as you were talking, I think a huge difference is that Boba Fett, even in his like adult age, I think is still kind of deep down just like this traumatized child, right?
Yeah,
like who never had a childhood. He grew up in like like the biggest galactic war. His father is dead. He's just surrounded by violence. Like where even though Jango probably had his childhood was full of violence, it was also full of like a time where he could develop and learn what it was to be like part of
he had family,
like a family and a culture and right. So yeah, which makes it make a lot of sense about why like Boba Fett is just so like untrusting and why he doesn't want to work with like the guild and like all that kind of stuff, because he's just probably feels alone and probably always has felt alone.
That's a very good point.
I think and I was gonna say I kind of feel like that's it, like the Book of Boba Fett to me seems like maybe it would have worked a bit better if it was like, I don't know, like 6 seasons long. Like we had a long time, not that I would want anyone to go through 6 seasons of Book of Boba Fett, but that kind of like maybe like a whole season where we just saw Boba Fett like have to rebuild himself and like learn what it was to like be Boba Fett again. Like I think looking in the EU, that's kind of what happens. I think he has like memory issues for a long time, after he comes back, like out of the like he doesn't have his ship, he doesn't have his armor, he's like, I think he loses a leg, and he like literally and I think mentally has to rebuild himself. And we do get like, when you look at similarities, I feel like we get maybe an episode of that. Like, does he have memory issues?
Yeah, he does. He has flashbacks of his childhood.
But I think a lot of that's when he's in the back to tank.
It's when he's in the back to tank and he goes through his whole, it's like his life kind of flashing forward before your eyes kind of thing. But it's interesting that you mentioned that though about Jango and family and how that's something Boba never had, and for what he should have had, at least for the length of time that he should have had as a kid. And it's so true, and that leads to sort of the next point on here, which is the redemption arc. In the Book of Boba Fett, he is of the mindset now, after having this sort of near-death experience, it's sort of awoken him into this idea that he being part of a tribe is better, right? Like, and this probably goes hand in hand with the fact that the Tuskens kind of saved his life, and then at first they were probably going to mistreat him, and then he kind of earns their respect, and then they have a mutual thing going on. He learns to love, and he learns to like coexist with people, and learns that, oh, this is actually better, than being on my own, and like this is a good thing. And so that's why he says to Fennec Shand in the show, Like, I can offer you something that no other crime lord can, loyalty. And it's part of his redemption arc that he does that. And I think that's something that plays hand in hand as well with Mandalorian. I think he is this lone wolf, lonely guy that like goes off and does his thing. He's a bounty hunter. He's good at his job. But he is a changed man after deciding to protect Grogu, right? Like, Grogu changes and warms him up a little bit. And, the result of that whole show is like, he's off in the sunset on a ranch somewhere raising this kid. And they have given loyalty to one another. Grogu has saved Din Djarin just like a lot, with under a couple situations, like he has saved his life, this kid. And so like, I think they also have this loyalty to one another that Fennec would have to Boba. So there's definitely a lot of similarities there.
Yeah, that is interesting. Like, when you say loyalty, that's like, because I think that's maybe something he develops in the Book of Boba Fett, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I guess
Because I think that's like another huge difference between Jango and Boba is that Boba doesn't have loyalty at all. I don't know, maybe like in the Clone Wars, he does, like, has like, because that seems like a very Mandalorian trait, and I think Boba Fett is supposed to be this, like, he's like a Mandalorian, but he's not, kind of, right?
Yeah, he was always an outsider, because I think
like he'll do whatever it takes,
Well, I think Jango was cast out, so he wasn't even allowed to. So Boba wasn't even allowed to go back and rejoin the Mandalorians.
Yeah.
We got our final point here, which is Western influences. So both the Mandalorian and Boba's original portrayal draw heavily from Western tropes, such as lone gunslinger, lawless frontier kind of themes, and the themes of honor and survival. So I've never actually, like, okay, so I have seen a number of Westerns, but I'm not super well versed in Westerns. All right. Like, it's not like I sit down and watch Western films every week. I don't know about you guys, not my genre of choice.
I enjoy them. I know Bryce has seen a lot more of them than I have.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm getting older, but I've been definitely seeing a few more now.
Is there any examples that come to mind which might seem like a kind of a direct pull into Boba or Din Djarin stories that you think back to any Westerns that you've seen? They're like, oh, that is straight out of this movie or that movie. Minus the spurs and all that, like just like character attributes or anything.
Yeah, well, maybe not. Like the classic, very obvious one is just like, kind of the Seven Samurai or Magnificent Seven, where I think it's happened a few times, whether in Mandalorian or Book of Boba Fett, where they roll into a town and then I think it's in Mandalorian where they have to, they're kind of rolling through, but then, I think it's in that like tribal episode and they have to defend the village, from the Empire, and then they get their 6 best friends, they get the band back together and they have to defend the village. Like that's a very Western theme.
Like Boba and the mods.
No.
Yeah.
They're going to come up with something.
Yeah. I think a better example is that episode you're talking about, though. The Mando trains the village of farmers, right? Like with Cara Dune's character. Yeah.
I know they've done that storyline in Clone Wars as well.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Turtle people.
Yeah. The farmers. We're farmers. We can't.
It's just the worst.
You remember that guy?
Like, I think one of the voice actors could make it in that day.
Yeah. Oh, jeez.
But even just to get back to what we're talking about there, even just kind of the trope of the man with no name, right? This kind of gunslinger, don't really know much about him except he's just this badass who kind of lives out on his own.
Yeah.
Deals with everything he has to by himself. Some bandits come and raid his farm. He's gonna go and take out each and every one of them himself. That sort of character.
Yeah, there's so many reasons to love, the cool helmeted jetpack dude that can fly. Like, I mean,
it has a lot of cool factors.
I'm still kind of a sucker for Buzz Lightyear, but when I was little, like Buzz Lightyear was like my hero, He was green, my favorite color. He had wings. He could fly. He's got all the gadgets.
He's like white and purple.
Yeah. He's got the cool attitude. Like this.
That is so interesting. He's just like Boba Fett for kids.
Yeah,
he kind of is, right?
Yeah, he's the Space Ranger, right? Like that's another Western reference. There, it's like he's like a Lone Ranger.
They both have wrist blasters.
Yeah, they do. But yeah, like a Lone Ranger, a Space Ranger. It's kind of the same thing. Like Like it's just there's so much I think influence when it comes to just how Boba's character has come out of this genre of a Western story. You know, like Star Wars is based on a lot of Western tropes and things, and Buzz Lightyear was a direct replacement for Western stuff. That's why Woody is all ticked off, right? Like he's like, oh, this cool space guy that the kids all like better now. I'm like yesteryear's toy. Like no one's gonna love me anymore. And yeah, I mean, this just got real deep, but like,
this is Boba and Din Djarin.
No, I just think like that's kind of like the cool factor of Boba Fett. When I was a kid, I just loved. There's something about Boba Fett that I just really loved, and that was just kind of like as a result of just really loving Buzz Lightyear so much. Yeah, he was just like the cool guy that flies. He's got a cool attitude. He's green. You know, he's got all the stuff like all that. You know, all that kind of thing. And I just there's something that's just innately awesome about a Rocketeer and like just a guy that's like Boba Fett, you know, like it's never gonna get old. Like when Jango was a character, I mean, like yeah, there may have been people out there who have been like, yeah, I don't know, like I don't like the fact that Boba's a clone now, but at the same time, it's like, but look how cool Jango Fett is. Like he got his own video game. I mean, he's a super sick character, and they got no better. Like they got the best actor in the world to play him, Tamara Morrison.
I honestly don't think they could have casted it better.
That dude is so awesome. Like nobody is that handsome and looks that badass just in there every day. You know what I mean? Like
it's true. He goes around the kids.
They just nailed it.
Yeah.
They're like, we need someone that, you know, we're never going to see his face, but just has like the most badass voice ever.
It's true.
You know?
Yeah.
And they like, yeah.
And they liked his face so much that they cloned him a million times.
I'm gonna have to get going, but there is like well, as I was reading the EU, there's like this really cool moment here that I just read where and I like it because it's like there's like another character that returns, because we don't often get like, you know, Boba Fett interacting with people from his past, but in the EU there's this part where he apparently has to get like his leg replaced because it's like it got all messed up, I guess, in the Sarlacc and from the cloning. And he goes to get his leg replaced, and he goes and seeks out Tanwi again, and this is in the EU, which I had no memory of, like, you know, Kaminoan, you know, being around, you know, after like far after Return of the Jedi, which is like a really cool idea. I don't know.
I like that too.
Yeah, it's just something I thought was really interesting that I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, that's awesome.
There's lots of these cool points of Boba's old storyline that I do hope they bring back, because like some of that stuff and like the clone cancer and that all, they can weave all that into his current storyline if we get a continuation, which I really hope we do.
I hope we do too. Yeah. I'm waiting for that Blu-ray, Disney.
All right, guys, I'm gonna head out.
All right, thanks so much for popping on, man.
Thanks for joining, dude.
No worries.
We'll catch you later. All right, let's transition over to our next subject
hold on.
here.
There's a little bit more.
Oh yeah, you got some?
Well, yeah, I also just want to talk about the fact that in the EU, Boba did eventually become Mandalore.
Oh yeah, so
yes.
yes.
It's worth at least mentioning, because the EU storyline of Boba kind of rebuilding Mandalore and then becoming because it was during the using Vong War, and then eventually becoming Mandalore. And we're now seeing parts of that storyline. It's being portrayed a little differently in Din Djarin's story.
Yeah.
Because when he got the Darksaber, everyone was expecting him to become Mandalore.
Yeah, the leader of, and for those who don't know who Mandalore is, he's the leader of the Mandalorian culture, essentially, right?
Yeah. I mean, they also have their own planet, or did. So it would have been like their king, essentially.
Yeah.
They've changed that a bit, where now it looks like they're probably going to pass that off to
Bo-Katan.
Bo-Katan. Yeah. So there's going to be, I think there are people out there that are pretty annoyed with the fact that they've taken Boba Fett's story. Now they're kind of like giving it away to different people, essentially.
I think, here's what I don't mind about it, is that as long as they stay true to the character of Boba Fett, I'm okay with that, right? Because the EU is full of so many crazy things and so many different stories, and I'm not sure Boba, like, in my own opinion, I'm not sure he is like the character choice to lead Mandalorian culture. He
Well-
is. We were just talking about the fact that he wasn't even in the EU allowed to be part of that culture because of.
Yeah, that's why it was like a big deal. It was also, we talked about how he wasn't like a loyal person or like a group person, right?
Right. So like.
But he developed that during the Yuuzhan Vong Wars because he actually worked for the Yuuzhan Vong. Then he turned and was helping the rebel side, but he gathered the Mandalorian clans and he actually led them in a war against Mandalore, and they actually led against the Yuuzhan Vong, and they actually beat back the Yuuzhan Vong and were better for it. And through that, he developed a lot of skills to be a good leader, and that's how he got to that place. And I feel like we're getting like a weird version of that with a lot of pieces taken out. Because instead we're getting him with the Tuskens.
We're getting the groupie Boba,
Yeah.
but minus the leadership stuff.
And the badass part of him getting there.
See, like I do like the idea that he becomes a crime lord, though.
I'm still on the fence.
Because his
but-
whole life has kind of been in that field, and I do like the idea that he just kind of elevates himself to this point of leaving a legacy, a different kind of legacy than what Jango left. Because I think if Jango was as committed to his career as he was, that would be like the ideal place to be, is like at the top, right?
So
And
it's just totally different career choices, though.
it is, but it's almost like I guess like any career, like one day I think a lot of people hope that they just advance and they just naturally a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people get bored of what they're doing, and I think that's the main motive to like kind of do something else, but do something adjacent and maybe do something better, like something that pays more and they can pay more but do less kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like. And
Sure.
in that
And
world,
also,
like
you get older, you can't really be a
Totally.
bounty hunter forever.
100%, yeah.
That being said, cybernetics go a long way.
Well, I think Boba's the kind of character that if and yes, he did a lot of like sort of more so good deeds, I think, in his show, but at the same time, like there is this side of that job which comes with its very gritty nature, and there's a lot of tough choices coming his way. He's not always going to have to be he's not going to be a hero very long in that industry. You know what I mean? Like as a crime lord, I'm pretty sure.
Would you argue at this point he's a failed crime lord?
No, I don't think he's a failed crime lord. I think we haven't seen him yet succeed as a crime lord, like other than his duel with the Rancor, or whatever, overcoming Cad Bane. I mean, like really, we haven't really seen him be the crime lord that he has set out to be. The whole Book of Boba show was really just kind of getting him to that level, working his way up and like trying to earn that seat, because at the beginning of the show, he just shoots Bib Fortuna and takes it over. It's like he didn't earn that. But the show is really about him earning this mantle of a crime lord and creating this loyalty. And I think that's important for a crime lord, because why doesn't anyone just shoot Jabba the Hutt, right? Like, why doesn't anyone just kill their crime boss and just take over? And it's loyalty that keeps them there, and it's loyalty that keeps the jobs like consistent, keeps everyone happy. Everyone, when you look at Jabba's palace, everyone's celebrating all the time. Like, what are they celebrating about? They're in Jabba's palace. Like, you'd think it would be a bit of a gloomy place to be. You know what I mean? But like,
Maybe if you don't look like you're having fun, you get shot.
yeah, who knows, right? But I think there is this sort of hold over people that crime lords have, and
They have a lot of power.
yeah, and they do. They have a lot of power, but they have this hold over people as well, and a lot of them are they're crime lords, so they probably have a very negative way of getting that power.
But it's got to take a long time to get to a point of being like something as big as the Hutts or like Black Sun or the.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like he's definitely gonna have
Like
a lot of work
generations. It's not even just something you do one lifetime.
No, yeah, for sure. Oh yeah, no, yeah, 100%. So like, I guess all I'm trying to say is like, I don't think it was a bad story decision to make him a crime lord. I just don't think we've really seen any of it happen yet. I think what we've seen is him get to that level, and what we're gonna see is now that he's got the loyalty of some sort of, I guess,
Associates.
Associates. Yeah, that's a good word to put it. People he respects, he respects, in return, and they work together, right? Like, but he's still the boss. So. I think we've yet to see kind of the more fruit that comes out of that story, and I do hope that they go back there and tell some more story that happens to be with Boba as a crime lord, and maybe that's something we'll see in the next Star Wars movie with the Mandalorian and Grogu. Like
I
maybe
hope so. Like
maybe
to see
he'll
where
be in it.
that goes. We haven't heard anything about Boba Fett storyline.
Yeah.
Do you see? Because do you see any potential of him having more storyline to do with the Mandalorians themselves?
No.
You don't think he's going to have anything to do with that? There's going to be completely disassociated?
I think that the one time that he teamed up with Bo-Katan and the others, none of them seemed to have any kind of respect for him because
but that's his. But then would you argue that he earned any respect by the end of the episode?
Maybe to a degree. I don't think there's this idea that they'll ever merge or be a thing, or like, I don't know. Like I really think like he is kind of like happy where he's made it, and because
part of me does wonder if him becoming a crime lord is a stepping stone of him kind of learning to rule as a leader, and then he technically is learning the skill set to potentially become Mandalore later.
I guess if Bo-Katan dies or something, like,
who knows? I don't know, but like,
I don't know. Here's the thing about Bo-Katan though, as like a side subject. But Bo-Katan, the leadership and leading Mandalore runs in her family.
Yeah.
So like for her, it's a natural step to be in that
which is why
position.
it made a lot of sense that it would go to her if she's back.
Yeah.
This is me just trying to see if there's any potential to keep Boba as part of it.
I really don't think there is, and not to mention like he has never once ever held the Darksaber.
No.
Doesn't seem to have an interest in it, and because that's such a big part of the canon story ever since like Clone Wars with Pre-Vizsla showing up, I don't think Boba ever had a shot at that storyline. Like it's amazing that it's worked out the way it has with Din Djarin getting his hands on the Darksaber because of the Moff Gideon storyline. But I mean, I really don't think Boba has too much. I don't think they'll go back there again. I don't think they're gonna repeat the story of passing the torch and it happens to be Boba Fett. I don't really know about that. I think it would be somebody else, like Bo-Katan as a kid or something like that, and that'll be the heir or heiress. Who knows?
It'll be Grogu.
All right, should we transition over to something else here?
I suppose so.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, I'm curious to see where it's gonna go though, because I feel like his storyline has just been, the original storyline has been kind of strip mined.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah,
I'm reluctant but curious. I guess that was how I would describe it.
Yeah, fair enough. I guess we'll hope for many good things to to expect. Because like, would you be happy if they made a really good story of just Boba being Boba and like you didn't even touch that area of him becoming Mandalore or anything like that? If you got evidence that like this could work as like him being a crime lord, him being like Boba Fett again, like would you be satisfied with that?
I would, if he's a crime lord like Jabba that just sits on his butt all day and sends out hirelings. I don't think I would ever be satisfied.
No, I don't think they'll ever do that either, to be honest.
He needs to be I'm going to do it myself kind of guy, and be like right down in there and right in the grit of it.
From what we've seen in the show, and that's the one thing that I think we did get out of the show as well, is like he is that guy. Like he is a crime lord who is in the action. He's right there next to Din Djarin, taking on all the hard job, right? Like
he rules from the front,
puts his neck out there. Yeah. So I think I think that's exactly what we'll see, if any, if that's encouraging enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
I suppose I can be satisfied with that.
All right, let's hit it. All right, so Marvel Comics, historic tradition of Star Wars comic book adaptions. This has been done for every Star Wars movie known to man, I think, other than Solo. Maybe they did do Solo. Anyway, Marvel has a history of doing this to Star Wars movies. They adapt it into a 4-part series or a 6-part series or an 8-part series or whatever. A couple of years ago, back in 2019, it was previously announced that a 5-issue limited series would bring the 2019 The Rise of Skywalker to the page. And at one point, this was canceled. And I think it was only a few months after the film came out that this was news, that this comic book series would in fact no longer be coming out. And that is no longer the case. We have made it 5 years since the...
Is that when Rise of Skywalker came out?
2019, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that was also when Mandalorian came out, believe it or not. But now here we are again. The comic book series arrives just in time for the launch of Charles Soule's and Luke Ross's Star Wars Legacy of Vader series, which is an ongoing series set between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, which there is 1 year between those two movies. So that series actually just came out with an issue number 1 last week on Wednesday. 2 weeks ago, as of when this episode launches, that is. And The Legacy of Vader reveals Kylo Ren's evolution as supreme leader of the First Order and his daring quest into his grandfather's tragic past. The Rise of Skywalker comic adaptation gives fans a chance to experience the dramatic end of the character's story in a whole new way, with scenes that weren't in the movie, things that have been adapted probably from the novel retelling, I would imagine, if I was to take a guess. They may have even snuck in their own things as part of like maybe making certain elements of that story feel a bit more cemented in the canon, I guess, right? That's kind of the hope. And yeah, that could be a good thing.
No, for sure. I feel like just I blame mainly due to production reasons. There's that film always feels very fast to me. So there's definitely a lot of space to like fill stuff in that might make things make more sense.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the news from Marvel, and I thought that was really interesting stuff because
it feels weird 6 years after the movie, though.
It does, and the fact that this was canceled, right? Like, I think it was in response to maybe the movie just not doing very well. That's just what I would naturally come to assume.
Because just picture, say you watched the movie in 6th grade, you'd be graduating this year.
Next year, but yeah.
Doesn't mean like this will be your last year at school.
Yeah,
that's a long time to have a gap.
Yeah. It feels like time hasn't, like, I don't know, it doesn't feel like it's been that long, but yeah, after 5 years in limbo, they're finally doing it, and it publishes this year in 2025, with the first issue coming out on the 26th of February, the second coming out March 26th, the third coming out April 30th, and then 2 more after that, one being in May and then June. So with the trade paperback launching later this year in October, which is the bound version. But I just thought that was really interesting stuff, and the fact that it's been 5 years, I guess revisiting that story, maybe they thought, okay, maybe it's worth doing. But when that movie came out, I remember you and I having chats about, where's all the stuff? Like, where's all the, there was no toys, there was no Lego, hardly any.
Yeah, there's a huge lack.
No, hardly any Black Series stuff. Like, you couldn't find a yellow lightsaber Rey action figure for like the longest time. In fact, I don't even know if you still can, like, to be honest.
Did Black Series not even do it?
No, I mean, not for a long time, as far as I know. I think you could, I think eventually you could get Dark Rey, but
with the Nutcracker saber.
I mean, you can't even get a yellow bladed Rey still, like in Lego. I don't think.
I don't think they ever made it. No,
I don't think they still.
To be fair, that'd be a tough set because it's the only times that ever happened, unless they sold it as like a one-off minifigure and like a polybag or something.
It could be a really sweet set though. Like, they could just make the Lars Homestead, which they've like made very few of those, right?
Okay, yeah, you're right. Have they ever made it?
They have, but it's been like a long time. I'm pretty sure.
Usually just the tiny little bubble hut, right? They don't do like the whole thing.
They've made the Lars Family Homestead kitchen as a exclusive,
right?
At one of the conventions.
I don't know if that counts.
I don't know if that counts either, to be honest. But that's it, I think. There was like, if you don't count any of the micro stuff, which there may have been a micro scale set for, I don't think there was any that they did. I'm looking right now online. I don't see one.
Yeah, I don't think they've ever made it.
And that could be a really sick set.
It would be a cool set. That being said, if they did something like that, I would love to get it with multiple eras of characters. So it'd be cool to see it with like prequel era, so you get Attack of the Clones, Anakin, Padme, and you can have
kind of like the Falcon. How they did the Falcon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you get like the old Lars, the father, and like
you could do 3 generations of characters.
Yeah, exactly. I was getting that. That'd be really cool.
They could even throw in like droid, like Rusty 3PO, like when he's like got all the rusty, like kind of like the silvery dark metal plates on him in episode 2 when they they meet him again for the first time. It's
I don't think they've ever sold that one.
They've never sold that one.
That'd be pretty neat. Do that, and then you could also do all the droids.
Yep.
They'd never give us this many minifigures, but theoretically, you could do all the droids from the Sandcrawler.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's so much potential, right? So that's kind of the exciting
cool to
part.
have that and one of the Sandcrawler sets.
Yeah. But anyway, it was just one of those time periods where a movie came out. There wasn't much stuff because the movie wasn't as successful. But normally you get a lot of those toys before the movie comes out, but it just didn't feel like they put in the effort.
Well, it's been a long time, so I'm trying to remember. But I think there was a lack of sales around The Last Jedi. And then I think my understanding was toy companies weren't as willing to take a chance on a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, it was during COVID too, so maybe like...
And there was yearly movies. So it would be sequel movie, and then like Rogue One, and then sequel movie and Solo, right? Like it was every year. Every year was something. There was no downtime.
Yeah, it's sort of unfortunate because... I feel like there was a big push with both episode 7 and 8 with Lego sets and
all like a whole bunch of Hasbro stuff too.
A whole bunch of Hasbro stuff. They did those Force Fridays that we went to at Toys R Us because we still got Toys R Us in Canada.
Yeah, because there's a huge push from Force Awakens, right? And they just try to keep that momentum going, like it was like with Phantom Menace. It was the same thing, right?
Yeah,
I feel like it slowed down a bit after Phantom Menace. Like there was still stuff, but it wasn't like as everywhere.
Yeah,
but I feel like they tried to keep it going.
Like, I remember a ton of stuff for Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. Like each prequel had like a ton of toy launches.
Was it like everywhere, like tie-ins with like Pizza Hut and everything?
Oh yeah. Like I remember
Attack of the Clones and
we were talking about this the other day or the other week when we were talking about that exact thing. But yeah, I remember Revenge of the Sith. There was a big, huge like Pepsi campaign with Mountain Dew and all that stuff, and you could get like characters on the bottles and the cans.
I thought that was just Phantom Menace.
Big cardboard cutouts that save on foods. Like I remember all that. Yeah, it was crazy.
Okay, so maybe the difference then is those movies are all like basically 3 years apart.
I think it was just,
for like that much Star Wars advertising.
And don't forget, it was a different company back then, right? Like now it's a Disney thing. Back then, Lucasfilm was just Lucasfilm. They, the way that things are managed like that these days is different. But they also don't need revenue from toys. Whereas like George's films relied on merchandise to fund the movies.
Yeah.
Whereas like nowadays, like they got the Disney dollars. Like they don't technically need the merchandise sales anymore. Like they really want it, but it just didn't seem like they did with that last one. They were like, it almost felt like they were giving up, which was kind of sad. So anyway, it's kind of cool to see something like this resurrected. It gives me a little bit of hope that maybe, because, I'm a little hard on that last movie, but like it gives me a little bit of hope that maybe they'll revisit some things in that time period and maybe put out some Lego and put out some things that people have been clamoring for. It's like, it'd be cool if they did that kind of thing.
I think they finally released Emperor Palpatine in the red cloak.
Yeah.
I think you could buy it if you buy the latest Lego Star Wars book with all the sets.
Yeah, that's the one you get. Yeah. Maybe it'll be worth something. Maybe that'll be the one that's
maybe because all the other books is not worth anything. They made too many of them.
Yeah. All right. Cool. We got one more backup subject, and then we can wrap things up for the day. So. Last subject here. I know we've talked about Galaxy's Edge a number of times, but there's some new news that on the horizon here. I just had a conversation about this on the phone with somebody recently. I think it was Kirk. We were talking about Galaxy's Edge and how they've been, when it launched. And for those of you who have not been to Galaxy's Edge, there is this story that takes place in that park, and it is perpetually taking place between episode 8 and 9, constantly. The rides, the stories on the rides, the characters that show up in the park, everything. And they've made some exceptions to this for promotional reasons of Disney Plus content. So they recently did allow Boba Fett, as well as Mandalorian and Grogu, as well as I think maybe one other character from that time period show up in Galaxy's Edge as a official licensed person that can sign your Disney or autograph book and stuff like that. But that was it, right? Like so far, because it's Galaxy's Edge, because of the time period it takes place in, Darth Vader doesn't exactly show up.
Yeah.
He's not in that time period, therefore he's never going to walk through.
Have a lot of gripes about this.
Yeah. Okay, so here's where the big news is. Luke Skywalker is to appear in Star Wars Galaxy's Edge alongside new projection show at Disneyland. So here's the news. I got this from the very famous site, wdwmagic.com. They're very on top of all things Disneyland, Disney World, big Disney news stuff for the parks. So they write, Disneyland is set to introduce 2 major additions during Season of the Force in 2025. A new nighttime projection show in Galaxy's Edge and a rare character encounter that may feature Luke Skywalker. Both additions will be exclusive to Disneyland for now, but could make their way to Walt Disney World. I guess here's hoping. So the projection show is called Shadows of Memory, a Skywalker Saga.
It's funny because I feel like a lot of us fans can say the same thing. I'm seeing our favorite characters at Disney World.
Yeah. So beginning March 28th, Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland will feature a brand new nighttime projection show called Shadows of Memory, a Skywalker Saga. This show will use projection mapping on the spires of Batuu near the Millennium Falcon, bringing to life key moments of the Skywalker Saga. So if you look at the Falcon and you picture the big spires behind it, the mountain kind of terrain, so they're going to be doing a big projection on that mountainside. And it's going to be a sort of a flash through the Skywalker Saga. So you're going to see visuals from Phantom Menace all the way through the Rise of Skywalker. It'll feature major scenes from the films tying together the legendary story of the Skywalker family. The soundtrack will feature iconic themes from John Williams' scores, immersing guests in the story. This marks the first time Galaxy's Edge will host a projection show, adding a nighttime entertainment element to the land. And if this show proves popular at Disneyland, Hollywood Studios in Florida could possibly take on the same thing. The other big news about this being Luke Skywalker coming to Batuu. This is a Luke Skywalker in the image. He is depicted using the same exact costume that we saw him in the Return of the Jedi as well as the Mandalorian Season 2 finale. So he's got this big black cloak on, big belt buckle, all that stuff, with R2-D2 by his side. So for the first time, a shadowy visitor will appear in Galaxy's Edge. And this is Luke Skywalker. So the timeline, again, between episode 8 and 9 makes Luke's appearance very unusual, unless it's a Force Ghost version. But
are they making him look like the Return of the Jedi version? Okay.
Yep. And Disneyland has introduced temporary character encounters before, including Boba Fett, Fennec Shand, Ahsoka Tano, Din Djarin, and Grogu. Hollywood Studios has never had a Luke meet and greet, but again,
it's weird to think that there's been a Star Wars land for years now, and there's never been the original trilogy cast.
And that's been our main complaint. That's pretty much the end of the article here, but they do say, like, if it goes well, could this set the stage for more legacy characters to appear in Florida? And this is something that we have talked at length about when we've visited the park, and how the success factor of that park has really probably been met with some level of criticism to that extent. Like the fact that you can go to Disneyland, buy Star Wars for all of its value with these classic iconic characters. They make their new stuff, and then they only promote the new stuff. It's like, where's the draw to the old fans and like fans of, the characters that made this thing famous in the first place?
I get that they're trying to push it for the next generation and have all this so that it can be carried on, right? Because not every kid wants to watch something from 1977.
Right. I guess so. I mean, like, that's kind of hard to believe that Star Wars might be actually like too slow now for kids, but like it's like, I guess so, maybe.
I think it's also just a matter of it being new and fresh.
Yeah.
That being said, it feels like they went too far, in my opinion, and just kind of neglected all the George stuff.
Yeah, a lot of people also forget that, like, Star Wars has had a long history at the parks even before Disney bought the company.
Like Star Tours.
Like Star Tours, it's been there a long time. They've always had a good relationship with George Lucas, and George Lucas has always been a fan of Disney's ever since he was a kid. He was there for opening day, I think, or day 2 of Disneyland's opening. So, there's a lot of history there, and Star Tours has been renovated and it's been updated and it's been kept relevant as a thing. And they've even had they've had Star Wars parade shows. They've had those crazy, you can find them on YouTube, but these insane dance shows with like crazy moves going on, dude. Like,
I didn't know Darth Vader could move like that.
It was like, some of it's pretty like, man, you got like Padme and Leia doing their thing up there. It's like, what?
Yeah.
This is Disneyland? Like,
Boba Fett too, I think.
Yeah. It's like, what the heck?
Dancing.
So yeah, that's something you'll never see anymore. And
well, it's not canon.
yeah. And I think, that's sort of where I'm going with this is I've always had a high appreciation for the way that Universal Studios does the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. Very immersive, very timeless in the sense that it doesn't take place during any particular time. It's just all inclusive. Like the dragon is on Gringotts Bank. The ride is vaguely just got every character in it, you know, like it's just fun. Like it doesn't need to take place in a particular era. And I love the fact that they took this idea that everything in Star Wars kind of has its spot, and they decided on a time period which in my opinion was just not a very good decision to make. Like not
because I really liked the idea when I first heard about it.
Yeah.
So you could feel like you're visiting a place in Star Wars as it is, right? There's not any
Yes, exactly.
just like fan fluff put everywhere.
Yeah.
I really love that on paper, and having experienced it, I enjoyed it, but I feel like it doesn't have that same level of revisitability.
No, it doesn't. And I feel like this is where they could change it up, and it wouldn't take. So obviously my preference would be like, you know, Dark Times, post Clone Wars, pre Episode 4, something like that. That way you get like kind of the ability to use characters and
You can go from either side.
things of both trilogies of the original, right? If they had to make any slight adjustment that wouldn't require any massive renovations, other than the fact that the ride's no longer technically,
that's the biggest thing.
Smuggler's Run is way more vague than Rise of the Resistance, but that Rise of the Resistance would be a bit of a problem because yes, it very clearly puts it in this time period between episode 8 and 9. But other than that, if they just slid it to like before episode 7 and after episode 6, they could get away with featuring at least post Return of the Jedi characters as well as sequel trilogy characters.
I think you're right the first time when you're saying just make it like the Wizarding World, where like you can have rides that are in different eras, because I think people will be happy about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I only say what I said though, because if they really like this idea of keeping it the way it's kept, it seems like all these new characters they're bringing in are just post Return of the Jedi for Disney Plus shows anyway. That seems to be where a lot of the story is happening right now anyway.
Right.
So like it would make more sense if they just brought it back, because the real success is The Mandalorian. Disney's success with Star Wars does not lie in the sequels. It lies with The Mandalorian. That's the show that also helped launch Disney Plus, which, if it ever amounts to anything, will be the payoff of shows like The Mandalorian. That's the reason why they made a show like that, is because they needed something to launch into Disney Plus with.
It's true. But because they were locked down on the timeline, I feel like they missed the boat a little bit with all of the hype around Mandalorian. So people still go there and be excited, but it would have been a totally different thing if they did it, you know, the summer after Mandalorian season 1 came out.
Yeah. Yeah, so you know, my hope is that they do just remove this idea that the land is taking place constantly in this time period, and minus the one ride which is kind of permanently set the way it is. Most of the other, you know, and the Falcon is like, okay, well, as long as there's a big span of time in which it kind of looks that way. So like,
and a lot of that's all screens, so it's way easier to change that out than
it is. Yeah, like totally. Like the Smuggler's Run could one day be what it is with what it is, and then the next day all they do is pop out Hondo, put a different character in there, replace the video feed, boom, you got a different ride, right? Same ride, but also different. Kind of like Star Tours.
You could even keep Hondo there and just have a different mission.
Dude, oh yeah, different voice lines, different dialogue.
That's it, right? It could be that easy.
Yeah,
and
it could be that easy.
I prefer that than swapping a Hondo. I like Hondo.
I do like Hondo. Yeah, he can stay. Yeah. See, this kind of leads to a greater discussion and like something that we talked about with a very special guest last year, Molly, about Star Cruiser. This idea that the park existed between episode 8 and 9 affected Star Cruiser as well, with it also taking place between episode 8 and 9. And this affected the skits on board the ship. This affected the just the narrative of which that adventure was carried out. And to a lot of people who may have been visiting the park that hadn't seen the new things and had only seen some of the original things, a lot of it may have felt unfamiliar or maybe just not for them, right?
I don't know how many people would have bought tickets at the prices they were and not seen
that's a big
sequel
one too.
Movies, but
that's a big one too.
In theory, let's say that happened. I'm not sure how Star Wars actually would have felt like if you hadn't seen the sequels, because it would have been. I mean, you could argue the same thing during the prequel era. If you only watched the original trilogy and then you went to something that was themed after the prequels, it would feel pretty different.
Yeah. But yeah, like I'm glad that they're taking these progressive steps towards a more diverse Galaxy's Edge. I mean, throwing Luke Skywalker in for the first time, that's like sad to say that it's big news, but it is.
'Cause when did it open? Do you know the date? The year?
Oh,
at least?
jeez. I think it was 2020, if I'm not mistaken.
After Rise of Skywalker. No, it had to be before that.
August 29th, 2019.
So it was with Rise of Skywalker. Okay. Immediately, I did think it was before that.
Yeah.
So I was closer to Last
no, it
Jedi.
was before Rise of Skywalker, because Rise of Skywalker was December 2019.
And yet they still didn't have any Mando stuff. That's pretty surprising. I guess because they're just so so dedicated to the era idea.
Yeah, yeah. So it's it's a bit shocking. It's but it really makes me want to sit down with like the guy who it's his job to like make these kind of decisions. You know what I mean? Like it's not all up to the CEO of Disney. Every Disneyland or Disney park has their own kind of CEO level guy that makes decisions, and then on top of that, I think below them they have like other people below them that kind of make creative decisions and stuff as well.
Full company. For sure.
Oh yeah, it's a full company in itself to beat like Disneyland, and then there's Disney World and all their parks, each with their own person, like Animal Kingdom, Hollywood Studios, all that stuff. And I imagine Hollywood Studios, whoever runs that park, has to be very, very much in collaboration with whoever runs Disneyland, because the Galaxy's Edges have to be relatively in sync, I would imagine, And then of course there's the collaboration with Lucasfilm on certain things. So I don't really know how complicated it is, but I would love to sit down with somebody and just be like, hey, just please explain to me.
I think it was the Lucasfilm side, man.
What's the mindset here?
I think it was the Lucasfilm side, because if you remember, there was a huge push of everything coming out is canon. Whether it be phone games, junior novels, postcards. I don't know what that one. Everything was supposed to be canon, so you could anywhere would tie in the universe, and it wouldn't cause any issues. And they did do an outstanding job considering how much stuff came out. We found very, very few issues that came about. Yeah. I think it came down to that, and then they had to pick an era, and that was the newest era at the time the new movie was coming out. It makes sense if you're looking at it from that perspective.
Yeah, I guess so. And again, I'm not against the idea that the park is enveloping you in a moment in time. I do like the idea there. It's just I don't think they executed it quite the way that I think most people would prefer.
True. I would argue they should have done two different parks between Disney World and Disneyland. They could have one that's sequel era,
that
and then
for sure.
one that's a different era.
That for sure. And it could have been a different planet entirely.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Another
Obviously,
original
that's
planet.
Twice as much engineering. Even if it's the same rides, they're just skinned differently. It's still
different.
It's a lot of design. There'd be a lot more money for them to do that. So I see why they didn't. But
yeah,
I think that actually would have helped a lot.
I think it would have helped a lot
it
too.
Was identical rides. It was just aired differently. So you could just basically have, even if it was the same park, just have one that's original trilogy, one that's sequel or whatever.
Yeah, they really put their eggs all in one basket with just doing the same park twice. Yeah. But yeah, residents of California, you got some Luke Skywalker to look forward to, and
please go so that Disney will see that people are interested.
Yeah,
please, for the rest of us.
Yeah, for the rest of us.
It's all on you.
Yeah.
No, please help us.
Help. Oh yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, I guess that's pretty much most of what we have for today. What else is new?
We're still trying to do a book review.
Oh yeah. yeah, the Living Force. So that's coming out at some point, probably the week after this episode drops, hopefully, if all things go well. Otherwise, maybe the week after. But yeah, in the meantime, we do have lots to look forward to this year, and I feel like we did an episode recently, which we kind of talked about that, but I do look forward to what comes out of Star Wars Celebration. I think they've kept quiet for a reason so far this year.
I haven't heard anything.
They're saving a lot of that news for Celebration. They want something to, they're going to announce some stuff for sure. 100%. They're going to announce some stuff. We're going to probably hear about the sequel to Jedi Survivor. We're going to hear about...
Is it be a trilogy, you think?
Oh, yeah, hands down. I think we're going to hear about the next animated series that they're going to launch. I think we're going to see some trailers.
Really looking forward to the new animated series.
Yeah.
It feels weird, like all this live action stuff and all these like cool things have been going out, but I'm starting to get a little nostalgic for just a simple animated show.
Totally.
And I enjoyed Bad Batch, but it was a very different like vibe.
It was,
than
yeah.
Clone Wars or Rebels.
For sure. Yeah, I want to revisit the Clone Wars stuff. We may even get a trailer to Mandalorian Grogu, hopefully, or season 2. Who knows?
Yeah, I could see that happening.
Yeah, I mean, like we'll have to wait and see, but yeah, lots of exciting stuff coming our way, and that's only in April, so we'll be covering it every day.
Coming up quick.
Yeah, you can count on it. All right.
Do you want to mention Launchpad?
Yes. Yeah, please do.
Oh, I'm doing it. We decided to do a new experiment and launch a sister podcast. It's just a way for us to streamline news from distributors like StarWars.com, so we can listen to it in audio format. So, fair warning, it is AI driven because we've just taken the articles and made them an audio version. But feel free to check it out. There will be a link in the description.
All right. Thank you so much, Blake. And Bryce, who's no longer here, we will see you in the next one.
See you out there. Keep flying.
All right. Ways to reach us in the description below. Social channels down there as well. Links for Launchpad, the archives, and so many other cool things. Definitely check it out. We'll see you in the next episode of Star Wars Escape Pod. May the Force be with you.